Parshas Vayeshev. And now we're getting to know the next generation of the Hebrews. We're going to get to know, as they grow up, the sons of Yaakov. And it begins by Vayeshev Yaakov Eretz Migurei Aviv. Yaakov was living in the land where his fathers lived. Of course, the land of Israel, then called the land of Canaan. Right? Eretz Canaan. Elah told us Yaakov, and these are the offspring of Yaakov. Yosef is the offspring of Yaakov. Ben Shiva Esra Shana, he was 17 years old. Now, interestingly enough, it doesn't tell us about all of the children of Yaakov. It just says, this is the offspring of Yaakov. Right? In the English, they say the Chronicles. It means something that comes from him that they're remembered by. Usually a person is remembered by their children. Right? You know, what you've left in this world. Yaakov here, it's saying that there's a specific, very strong relationship between Yaakov and Yosef that may not have been the same with the other brothers, which is why the Torah lists it in this way. And who was this Yosef? He was 17 years old, and he hayaroa es achiv b'tzon. So it says here, just in English, he was a shepherd along with his brothers, with his father's sheep. V'hu nar es b'nei bilha v'es b'nei zilpa nashay aviv. And he was a nar. We have to see what that word means. Together with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Now the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, of course, were the sons of the concubines, rather than the sons of Rachel and Leah, the two wives. Right? Of course, there was only at this point one son of Rachel. Binyamin is still, I believe, to be born. But you have but Leah had many sons. So when they said here, for a specific reason, it says that he associated with the sons of the two concubines, who, in the eyes of the brothers, of course, were considered to be less. Right? Their mothers were not full wives; their mothers were concubines. And then it says, "Vayavo Yosef." Yosef went, v'yazdib samrala avihem, and he spoke badly, right, about his brothers to his father. So let's see a little bit of what it's telling us here. So first it tells us, who is this Yosef? Yosef is 17 years old, so he's a teenager. And he was a shepherd together with his brothers who were shepherds, right, for his father's flocks. But then it says he was a nar. Now, a nar usually means an adolescent or a post-adolescent, like a young man. Right? Rashi explains here, when he says that he was a nar, let's see where we find it. It's on the second section here. Bahu nar shahaya osim ma'asin naros. He did things that were youthful. That's what he says. Why is he called a nar, like a youth, like an adolescent? Because he did things like an adolescent. What did he do? Mitakin sharo. He used to play with his hair. Mishamish be'enav, and he used to decorate his eyes. In other words, he was a handsome guy, and he liked to look good. So he spent time with his hair, and he would look at and he would make his eyes look nice. Kedei shia niriyafa, so he should look good. Right? So that's what it means be a nar. A nar means that he was sort of immature, not necessarily immature for his age. He was 17, and he acted like that. Now, it's an odd thing for the Torah to tell us this, so there must be a deeper meaning as to why he was called a nar, simply because he played with his hair. But there's a few things that we can learn from this. One thing is, there's a famous medrash that was in last week's parsha that people always quote, but you can see an interesting point. You have Leah was pregnant, it says, and she realized that she was going to, through prophecy, that she was going to have a boy. And she understood that if she would have a boy, she would have more than her portion of sons. And Rachel, who was also pregnant at the same time with her first child, was prophetically was supposed to have a girl. Which means that when you added up the numbers of children, there's going to be 12 tribes, Rachel would end up with one. And Leah would have many, many more. Right? So they would say that, that Leah felt badly for her sister, that she would not have as many. So it says that she prayed to God that the fetus within her should be exchanged with the fetus within her sister. So her sister had a girl, who we know was Dinah, and she was having a boy who was supposed to be Yosef, and it says that the fetuses were exchanged before they were born, and then it means that Rachel had Yosef, and Leah had Dinah. Now, it's an interesting thing because the Torah, when it introduces us to Dinah in last week's parsha, remember she's kidnapped and raped. It says, Vayeshev Dinah, Dinah went out. And it says there that going out is not a traditional feminine characteristic, because most of the women in these societies stayed in. They stayed within the house. They were modest. They didn't go outside among the public. They didn't go out by themselves. If they went out, they had somebody accompanying them. Not because you were afraid that they would do something. You were afraid that others would do something to her, which is what happened, right, in the case of Dinah. So you see that Dinah had what seemed to be a masculine trait, that she would go out, which many women didn't do, or wasn't common. Here we see Yosef has feminine traits. He's playing with his hair, he's decorating his eyes. And this is an allusion to that medrash, because originally the fetus that later became Yosef originally was feminine. It was a woman. And therefore it could be that we understand that he had within him certain feminine qualities, because originally the fetus that he was a woman. Leah, on the other hand, the fetus was male, and it has certain male qualities. And you see that she would go out, do things that men did. Now, in the end, does it really have a difference? It means that there's a effect on the personality. Now, it's not good or bad. It's just a fact. It has nothing to do with his gender identification. It has to do with this certain aspects of the personality, that Yosef was a very handsome man, and he understood it. It meant something to him. It was important to him. Leah appears to have been a bit more aggressive, perhaps, than the average woman of that era, and then she would go out without accompaniment, right? Thinking, I can take care of myself, when in this case she didn't, but she very well could have many times, which was something that also came. So this idea was either the source for having this medrash that talked about them switching, or it was a hint to the idea within it. But that's just one thing. The second thing is, when we see in other places this expression nar, where do we see this? We also see this in the story of Dinah. When Dinah is kidnapped, it says that the guy who kidnaps her, right? It talks about the prince in Shem, the prince whose name was Shem, he was a nar, it said. So meaning that he acted also without, like a young man would, without thinking. He was spontaneous. He saw this woman, he fell in love with her, and then it says that the brothers came and said, you want to marry our sister, you have to circumcise yourself and everybody else. And he just, boom, okay, if that's what I have to do to marry this woman, everyone gets circumcised. That's it, right? That's sort of impetuous. That's how a young person would do. An older person would think it through. And maybe they would, and maybe they wouldn't, but they certainly wouldn't jump to the fact of having to have surgery for themselves and for every member of their nation. But they did it. We see the same word is used there, so it has a hint of a certain immaturity. And as it goes on, we see the next thing it tells us that Yosef went and spoke badly about his brothers to his father, right? And this became the beginning of this what you and I would call sibling rivalry. We're talking about great people here, so I doubt that it was really sibling rivalry. I'm sure it was much more of philosophic differences between him and his brothers, but that you see that the brothers eventually want to kill him. They eventually want to sell him, right? And they eventually do. And in doing that, this really, the Torah is foreshadowing this, right, in a literally sense, is letting you know that the beginning of this problem is right here, where he would go to his father and say, my brothers are doing this and this and this, when they shouldn't be. The Midrash says that he went to his father and he told them that my brothers are eating a living animal. Right? In other words, here's a law. You're not allowed to eat a living animal. Not Jews, not non-Jews. Such a law called the Avram min Achai, that if you're going to eat an animal, the animal has to be dead before you eat it, because it's considered to be a horribly crude and cruel thing for a person to do, is to eat a live animal, like to pull a leg off an animal and eat it while it's alive. So it's forbidden for every human to do this, not just Jews, every human. However, if we want to take this in a legal sense, The Jews have a rule that says an animal has to be shechted before you eat it, right? You can't shoot it. You have to shecht it, right? If you shecht the animal, as soon as you shecht it, the law is the animal is dead. It's dead, okay? Now, there's another law that says that a mother who has a fetus within her, human or not human, a mother with a fetus inside of her, the fetus is a part of the mother's body, right? It's just like her arm. Until it gets to the point where the fetus is trying to come out, then it's saying, I'm independent and I have to get out. But until that point, it's totally dependent on the mother's body, and it's halachically considered to be a part of the mother. Okay? So there's a number of different aspects of why that applies, but in one area that applies in an interesting way with an animal. If a Jew takes a cow and shechts a cow, kosher, right? And after they do that, they find within the cow a calf, like the mother's pregnant, and the calf could exist. Right? In other words, you cut open the dead cow, and a calf comes out, and it's premature, but it's not to the point where it can't live. So according to Jewish law, that animal is dead, even though it's alive. You see it's alive, but according to Jewish law, it was a part of its mother. Right? It was not trying to come out. It was still a part of its mother. You killed the mother, therefore you killed the baby. When the animal came out, then it's considered dead according to Jewish law. Theoretically, you could eat that animal while it's alive and not be breaking the law, because according to Jewish law, it's dead. But that law only applies to Jews, because Jews have a law called shchita. You have to shecht an animal, and that's how you eat it. And it's what's called also a heter shchita, which means permission to eat the animal because you slaughtered it according to Jewish law, right? Which would then mean a Jew could do this. However, a non-Jew doesn't have shchita, doesn't have a law of slaughtering an animal ritually. It says if a non-Jew wants to eat an animal, it has to be dead. It doesn't matter how it dies; it has to be dead. It could die hidden by a car. As long as it's not alive, a non-Jew can eat it. A Jew has to eat it only if it's killed in a certain way, right? That's a difference. So if a non-Jew would kill a cow, and this animal, and it would give birth to an animal, right? Like after it died, like it would come, somehow you'd cut open the mother and it would come out, that animal would be considered alive for a non-Jew because you look at it, it's alive. It hasn't been killed. Right? And the idea of slaughtering the mother would not have an effect on the calf. So if you're a Jew and you have to keep kosher, then you'd be allowed to eat the animal, even though it looks alive. If you're not a Jew, you wouldn't be allowed. Now, I'm not saying that people do this. This is just a way of understanding a legal fact. So it says in the Medrash that Yosef went to his father and told him, my brothers are eating a live animal. They're eating a live animal. So what is the real argument here? Yosef was saying that we are Hebrews, right? He tells his brothers, we're Hebrews. We're not Jewish. We're Jewish when the Torah is given. Until the Torah is given, we're not Jews. By definition, Jews are those who are obligated to keep Torah. There was no Torah. It could be, and we understand that our forefathers, including Yosef and his brothers, kept the Torah, but they weren't obligated to keep the Torah. And now the question is, because they're not obligated, are they allowed to follow a lenient opinion like this, where they would see an animal, right? It was slaughtered and blah, 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 and this animal seems alive. Could they eat that animal or not? So if they believed that they were Jews, which the brothers said, we're Jewish, therefore they could eat the animal, right? Yosef believed that we're not Jewish, we're Hebrews. We're not Jewish until the Torah is given. Therefore, you couldn't eat the animal. So it's not that they were actually eating the animal. Yosef is telling his father, the argument between my brothers and me is, are we Jews today, right now? Do we have to keep the Torah, or are we choosing to keep the Torah? That was the argument. The way it's illustrated in the Medrash was, my brothers are eating a live animal. Right? This was because it says he said something bad. That's pretty bad. Right? But that's not necessarily what he really said. He was trying to express to his father that there's a difference of opinion. Now, this difference of opinion plays a very large role in the history of what happens, because very shortly we see that Yosef starts dreams. He has dreams. He has prophecies. And in one of the dreams, he's told that his father and his brothers will bow down to him. His father, his mother, and his brothers will bow down to him. Now, this is a serious thing, because he's basically telling, imagine, this is why you can say he's a youth. He's telling his father and his brothers that you're going to bow down to me. He's this young 17-year-old kid who clearly is favored by his father over his brothers, right? He's saying bad things about his brothers to his father, and his brothers know this. And now he's telling his brothers, you are going to bow down to me, and our father and mother are going to bow down to me. So for him to go and say this, right, he's not thinking through the ramifications of what he's saying. Because the ramifications are, if Yaakov is the head of the Jewish people, according to the brothers they're Jewish, then what he's doing is overthrowing the Jewish king, which he's liable to be killed for, right? You know, that's a capital punishment. If they're not Jewish, right, then he's not doing the same thing. Yosef said, we're not Jewish. So the argument between the brothers and the father, the brothers and Yosef, has ramifications in the real life, in that when Yosef goes and tells his father and everybody else, you're all going to bow down to me in my dream, his brothers are saying, this guy's rebelling against the king. He deserves to die. Because we're Jewish, and the Jewish law is, you rebel against the king can have you killed. Right? Yosef is saying, we're not Jewish. No, none of these rules have happened yet. We're still Hebrews. When we become Jewish, then those laws will happen. Right now, I had a dream from God that you're going to bow down to me, and that's nothing. You might not like that I tell you, right? It's, you know, you might feel humiliated, but the fact is, there's nothing wrong with it. So that's, see how the argument has lots of ramifications. It's not real, as again, it's not that they were eating a live animal. Right? This was the story. So this is just giving an introduction to who he is, and a little bit about his personality. And it says then, V'Yisrael ohev es Yosef. Now here it changes Yaakov's name. Right? Before we call him Yaakov, now we call him Yisrael. Now we know from last week's parsha that the name is to be used, but you have two names. But when is it used? Yaakov is used whenever we're talking about the father of 12 sons, a man who was a patriarch, but he's a person. And we're dealing with him as a person. So Yaakov is a person. Yisrael is a concept. He is bigger than life. Whenever Yaakov plays the role of Yisrael, then he's playing the role of the father of the Jewish nation, and that everything that comes from him and everything he does is for the creating of the Jewish nation. And therefore his actions are very precise, his words are very precise, everything he does is very precise for the sake of the future of the Jewish people. But when he's Yaakov, then it's sort of like, you know, the president gets up and makes a statement, every political guy is evaluating his words. But then if the president's talking to his daughter, and a reporter hears him, the reporter's not going to start deciphering his words because he's just talking to his kids. He's not thinking through, he's just having a conversation. So it's the same idea. When it's Yaakov, even though everything he does was great and prophetic, but he was there being the father, being the husband, being a man a righteous man in his time. When he's Israel, he is the founding person of the Jewish people. So there's a difference, right? But so it tells us, it says this is the offspring of Yaakov. Yosef is 17 years old. But then it says that Yosef goes and tells his father bad about his brothers. And then the next line says, and Yisrael loved Yosef greater than his brothers. That Yaakov loved him. That's what you think. You think Yaakov is a man. A man could have flaws. He loves one son more than the other, which is not a good thing necessarily, right? It's probably not positive to show the fact that you love one of your children more than the others. It causes a lot of inner fighting. Even here where we're dealing with, you know, amazingly strong-willed, righteous people, every one of them, there still was, you know, something that was askew about this idea. But it changes his name to Yisrael. That is to say that for the sake of the Jewish nation, for the future, Yaakov loved him more. Yisrael loved him more. Not Yaakov, the father, loved one son more than the others. Yaakov, the father, we have no reason to believe he didn't love all of his sons. But Yisrael, the founder of the Jewish nation, had a special affection for Yosef, who we later see takes over in many ways as the leader of the world, right, and leader of the Jewish nation to some extent. Although some of his brothers still have that role, but he takes a very strong role. So here we see it's not talking about the father loving Yosef, it's the founder of the Jewish people loves Yosef. That's why the name changes. And it says, loves him more than all his brothers. Why? Ki ben zukunim hu, because he is a child of his old age. V'aseh lo kitonos pasim, and he made for him the coat of many colors. Right? That's where we see this. Now, we don't have a lot of explanations as to what this coat really was, or why it was what it was. There's different interpretations. It was a clothes perhaps that God made for Adam. It says at the end of Bereshis that when Adam realized he was naked, God gave him clothes. There are those who say it could be that. But it's certainly some type of regal coat, and it made him stand out. And that the reason that he was loved is that here Yaakov was an old man. Again, he was old. He was older. This was one of his last children. Yosef was a young boy, and he basically was like, you have an older father, and he has a son who helps him. So on a physical level, and that we can understand. But again, they were talking about Yisrael. Here we're talking on a great spiritual level. You see, Yisrael is getting older. He's looking back on the life he's led to create the Jewish people, and he sees this rising star of a son who perhaps will assume a very special role. So that's why it says that. And then it says, "V'yiru achiv ki oso ahev avihem mikol achim." The brothers noticed that the father loved him more than everyone else, and v'yisonu also, and they hated him because of it. Lo yachlu dibru l'shalem, and they couldn't even talk to him in a peaceful way. They were so bothered by the way their father treated him that they were upset. Now there are many reasons for this, not just the fact that he did that. Remember, he's the only son of Rachel. Rachel was clearly the favorite wife. She's the wife that Yaakov wanted to marry. He did not want to marry Leah. I'm sure he learned to love Leah. Leah had many, many amazing qualities. She was an extraordinary person, somebody we can't even describe how great she was. But clearly, even Leah understood that Rachel was the wife of choice. So the only child of Rachel at this point is Yosef. So there Yaakov has this extraordinary love for this woman, and then you have Yosef is born with great beauty, like his wife had. Perhaps he looked a lot like his wife. So he sees this, right? He sees this in the child. So then you have the children, the sons of the other wives are going to feel less. And then we also know that he loves him, right? He's this young boy when they're all adult men, and he's treating them special, and they're looking at this, right? And that also bothers them. So you see that. And then to even at worst, now we begin with the dreams. And I hear on 200 and 201 in verse 5, it says, Vayechalom Yosef, Chalom, Yosef has a dream, and he tells his brothers the dream. V'yosifu otzinoso, and it causes them to hate him even more. V'yomer aleim, and he says, Shimuna, listen, hachalom hazeh asher chalomti, this is the dream that I had. And then he says, just to go a little bit quicker, he says, behold, we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field, right? They're out in the field, they cut down wheat, and they're binding stalks of wheat together. When, behold, my sheaf arose and also remained standing, right? The one that I'm making, right, stood up, right? Then, behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. And all your things that you gathered together of the wheat stalks also stood up and bowed down to mine. Right? So his brother said to him, "What? You're the boss now? You're going to reign over us? Would you then dominate us? You're going to start telling us what to do? You're the little kid, and we're the adults." Right? And the brothers said, and they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his talk. So on the one hand, you see how the impetuousness of youth has come out in Yosef, that perhaps it might have been smarter not to say it, and it's certainly not to say it in such an abrupt way. He dreamt another dream related to his brothers. No, he goes and does it again. And he said, look, right, before that was a metaphor. Now we're going to talk even stronger. I dreamt another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars are bowing down to me. The sun and the moon is my mother and my father, and the 11 stars are you. Right? You're all bowing down to me. And he related it to his father and his brothers, and his father scolded him. Right? It's not right. Don't say this. He said to him, what is this dream that you dreamt? Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, to bow down to you to the ground? So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. As I say, the father realized there's something going on here. Right? This seems like something wrong. Why would Yosef, who I see so much potential in, would say these things, right? It's got to be that they're true. What are they meaning? So the brothers took it very plainly, and they hated him because of how he did this. Not necessarily what he said, but how he did it. And the father says he didn't comment. But he didn't forget it. He took it under advisement, so to speak. Right? And now he says, now that ends. And now, not necessarily does this immediately happen, but then it says, now the brothers go out to be shepherds. They're shepherds, right? They go out to do this for their father's sheep in a place called Shechem. V'yomer Yisrael Yosef, and Yisrael says to Joseph, Holo achicha roim b'Shechem, lecha v'yashelcha lehem. He says, go find your brothers. Your brothers out in Shechem. Go check up on them. See what's going on. Right? Go look into the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock. V'yomer le hineni, and bring back to me what's going on. Come and tell me what they're saying. V'yomer lo lech nare shalom achicha. Go see what your brothers are doing. V'ya shalom atzon, and what's going on with the sheep, as I said. V'yishveni davar, and come back and tell me what's going on. V'yashleichu me'emek Chevron v'yavo Shechema. And he sent them from the valley of Hebron, where they were, to Shechem, where the brothers were supposed to be. Now, Yosef goes out to look for his brothers, and he gets lost. He's lost now. Vayimatzeu ish, and a man finds him. Who is this man? We don't know. V'hine toa b'sadeh, he's wandering around the field. He doesn't know north from south, east and west. He doesn't know where he's going. V'yashlihu ha'ish limor ma tevakesh, and the man says to him, what are you looking for? What do you want? V'yomer es achi anochim mevakesh, I'm looking for my brothers. Higidin li efohem, please tell me, where are my brothers? Hem roim, where are my brothers, the shepherds? V'yomer ha'ish, the man says, Nosum mizeh, oh, they were here before, but they left. Ki shemati omrim, I heard them saying, Nelcha dasona, we're going to go to Dason. V'yelech Yosef achar achav, and then Yosef went after his brothers, v'mitzayim v'Dosan, and he found them in Dosan. So what's the story? Why does the Torah care to tell us that Yosef got lost on the way? He ends up finding them anyways, right? So first thing is we have to know, who is this man that he meets? So if you remember last week, it says Yaakov is going to go meet Esau, and he does all of these things, and it says that the night comes and a man starts wrestling with him. Who was the man? It was an angel. The man is not a man, he's an angel. Yosef is met here by the angel, we're told the angel Gabriel, and he's lost. And the angel is sent by God to direct him to where his brothers are. That is to say, this has to happen. He has to meet his brothers. He has to have what's going to happen, because he's going to end up being sold. That has to happen. Right? So he could have been wandering around, couldn't find his brothers, and went back to his father and said, look, you asked me to go find them, but I couldn't find them. And the world would have been a different place. But God couldn't allow that to happen. So he sends the angel to go down and find him. Now, a very interesting thing is that this is found in the words themselves. It says, the man finds him, and he said, and he sees he's just wandering in the field, and he says, what are you seeking? And this is an important message. Here, human beings have the same thing. Here we spend our lives, and we all have ideas what we want to do with ourselves, where we want to go, who we want to marry, what we want to do for a living, how we want to serve God. And there's good things happen to us, what seems to be bad things happen to us, interactions, challenges, problems, all types of things seem to happen to us. And and we get lost along the way. And the angel says to us, I can help you find your way, but I need to know, what is it that you're seeking? What do you want? You're looking to be rich? You're looking to have a full life of be righteous? What are you looking for? And the point is that the angel is saying, you have to have your priorities, right? They say if you don't know where you're going, you can't get there, right? So he's asking Yosef, what do you want from life? What are you looking for, right? If Yosef says, I'm just looking to have it easy, I'm going to do what my father wants me to do, he wants me to find my brothers, I can't find them, I'll just go back. What are you looking for? So he says, I want to go to my destiny. Right? He's telling the angels. The angel says, okay, you got to go to your brothers. That's the destiny. The destiny is you're going to go find your brothers, and what's going to happen to you is not going to be good. But that's the destiny, and this has to happen. Now, there is a lot of discussion about the whole concept from this point all the way until Yosef is sold about this concept of destiny. Because we as Jews don't believe in destiny. We don't believe that any one of us are destined to something. In other words, I'm not destined, like let's say, I'm destined to hurt someone. I'm destined to help someone. I'm destined to kill someone. Right? That, when you hear these expressions in the world, people believe this stuff. As Jews, we don't believe that. We don't believe that, for instance, that the stars can tell us our future. If I can tell you your future, then basically it's destined. No matter what you do, it's going to happen. You can lay in bed all day and not leave your house, and it's still going to happen to you. Somehow it's going to happen. Whatever it is that's supposed to happen. We don't believe that's true. But we do believe that there's a thing called national destiny or manifest destiny, that our people, the Jewish people, have a destiny, that we are to bring the world to completion. We're supposed to make the world a better place. We are destined to eventually bring the Messiah to the world. That's our destiny. We also had other destinies. A destiny, God said, you're going to go down to Egypt and be slaves. The Jews have to go through this in order to purify their soul to be ready to lead the world. This has to happen. Therefore, the destiny of Yosef was that he was the one who was going to cause that to happen. That had to happen. So we have an understanding that when someone or something is so important that the entire world depends on it, then there's destiny. So Yosef had to see his brothers. Yosef had to go down to Egypt. Yosef had to be alive. They couldn't kill him. That had to happen. That was the vehicle for Jewish history to happen. It wasn't simply that it was coincidence. So the angel's asking him, what do you want? Right? And he wants to fulfill his destiny. So he tells him where his brothers are. Otherwise he wouldn't tell him. Right? That's what it tells us here. Right? So now they see him and they say, look, the dreamer's coming. Right? Let's kill him. And they want to kill him. Now the oldest brother, Reuven, who by definition being the oldest brother is considered, right, he has the rule of the firstborn. Right? He's the leader. He hears and he doesn't want them to kill him. Even though they believe, according to Jewish law, and remember they believe they're Jewish, according to Jewish law, their brother is rebelling against the king. He deserves to die. So they make a court, a real court, and they decide. Yosef, on the other hand, doesn't believe he's Jewish, so he doesn't think he's liable. Reuven hears that opinion, and he says, you can't kill him. And we can't. So let's go. We will not strike him mortally, it says. So Reuven says, on top of 205, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him. And why? Because he intended to rescue him from their hand to return them to his father. So Reuven's idea was throw him in the pit. When the brothers get tired and they go on, Reuven will come back, take him out of the pit, and bring him back to his father. Right? But if you look at Rashi, you find a very interesting thing about this pit, where it says that this pit that he says to throw him in, I think it's on the last page, which is the real famous Rashi. He says, okay, it says here, throw him in. It says here at the end of this line, it says that they threw him. They said they sat to eat. They took him and cast him into the pit. The pit was empty; no water was in it. Right? That's what it says in the Torah. Right? They threw him in a pit. Why would they say the pit was empty? There was no water in it? Because normally, even in the desert, even in a hot climate, if it rains, the water goes into a pit and it sits there, and you can use that water, right? Or the water can stagnate. But whatever it is, there's water in pits. Right? They said there was no water in this pit. But it says the pit was empty, no water was in it. You don't need to say that. You could say either there's no water in it, or you can say it was empty. But if you say it's empty, not only there's no water in it, there seems to be nothing in it. Right? So what do you have to say? It was empty and there was no water. So Rashi is bothered by that. So he says there's no water in it. So Rashi says mashma. From this we can understand shenemar v'abur reik. The pit is empty. Any odea shein bo mayim. Right? I don't need to know that there's no water. You already told me it's empty. Ma Talmud. So what does it come to tell you? The fact that it says it's empty and there's no water, because if it's empty, there is no water. Why does it tell you? Ein bo mayim. It says there's no water in it. Mayim ein bo oval nechashim ve'achravim yesh bo. There's no water in it, but scorpions and snakes there is in it. That is to say, Reuven said, throw him into this pit. Right? There's scorpions and snakes in this pit. Now, remember, what's going on here? Reuven wants to save his life. The brothers want to kill him, right? Straight out, kill him. Reuven says, no, I'll throw him in this pit. There's no water in this pit, but there's snakes and scorpions in this pit, and then I'll come back and save him. But if there's snakes and scorpions, you throw him in the pit, they're going to bite him and kill him. So how does that help? And how's he expect that he can come back and save him? So this goes back on the idea of the destiny. That is to say that an average person who gets thrown into a pit with snakes and scorpions, you can presume that they're going to kill him, right? So here we see that since Joseph had a destiny, that he had to go to Egypt. He could not be killed. The entire future of the Jewish people depends on his going to Egypt. So therefore, when Reuven suggested we should throw him in the pit, and there were snakes and scorpions there, it was for this reason. You see, we understand that human beings have free will. A human being can choose to break the rules of God. He's not supposed to, right? God says keep kosher. You can choose not to. God says a dog, right, will not eat, fish food. The dog can choose to eat fish food. He won't eat it, right? He has no free will. He can't. He has choice, but he doesn't have ethical choices, right? He can't rebel. A dog. He does what he does, and all animals are that way. Humans, on the other hand, can. So God has to say, I have to intervene. The brothers are going to kill Yosef. I have to intervene. I have to intervene with humans who have free will. It means it's got to be an enormous situation for God to take away the free will of a human being, because that's an extremely important thing. Only human beings have free will, and for God to intervene to the point where He takes away the brothers' ability to kill him, all right, and He takes away their ability to choose, is something that God never wants to do, to take away human beings' free will. But when it comes to the free will of snakes and scorpions, God can direct them. They have no free will. They do whatever nature God gave them. If God makes a scorpion, that a scorpion gets near something, it's afraid, it'll bite it, right? It'll sting it. If a snake is afraid, it'll bite you. So God can change the nature of the scorpions and the snakes not to bite him, because they don't have free will, right? So it's a simple thing for him to do. So Reuven understood this. Throw him in the pit where there's snakes and scorpions. Reuven understood that there's a destiny here. Yosef can't die. So by throwing him in the pit, he knew he wouldn't be killed by the snakes and scorpions. He knew God would intervene. And then he knew he could go back and get him. That's how the story works there. That's why he did that. Right? And then, of course, it goes on that they end up selling him to these servants, to these guys going down to Egypt. Right? It says they sat to eat food, they raised their eyes, and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites were coming from Gilead, and they had spices and all types of nice smelling things, and they were going down to Egypt to sell them. Right? So Judah says to his brothers, look, what good is it to kill him? Kill Yosef. Right? And then, don't tell anybody. So let's just sell him. We can make some money. Right? That's what he said. And they did. They took the money, it says here. Right? The 20 pieces of silver they got. And they actually says, that Morris says that they bought shoes. There's a lot of explanation to that. I don't know if we have time for all of it, but they sold him. Now, the question is always asked, why does the Torah tell us about these guys going down to Egypt and what they were carrying? What do we care what they had in their wagons? I mean, today, here it is, year 2013. What do I care the Ishmaelites had in their wagons spices? You let them have, they could have dung. I mean, I don't care what they have in their wagons. Right? They're coming by, and the brothers want to sell Yosef to them. Right? Yosef's going to get to Egypt. We know he has to get to Egypt because we're outside the story. They're selling him. He's going to go to Egypt. What do I care what's in the wagons? All right? I don't care. But here we see a very important thing. The thing is that not only does God save Joseph, this righteous person, right, who doesn't deserve to be killed, but he saves him by putting him in a wagon that smells good. It has a nice fragrance. In other words, it's not enough for God to just save him. God says we have to go beyond saving him. This righteous person should also have a comfortable ride to Egypt. It shouldn't be that he just gets there. He's not going to go stowage on the boat. He's going to go first class. And God manipulated everything in the world to happen so that this group should go by at the right time, and they should be carrying fragrant spices, so that Yosef should have a trip when that happens. You say, it's sort of funny, like, why does God care so much? So we have this later on. Later on it talks about how you had the midwives in Egypt, and the midwives in Egypt, it said that they were named Shifra and Puah, and that was the name of the two women. It wasn't their name. Well, it was Miriam and Yocheved. Miriam is Moshe's sister, and Yocheved was Moshe's mother. But they were called Shifra and Puah. And the Gemara says, why? Why? And Rashi tells you, because one of them was L'Shaper, Shifra. She would make pretty the baby when she showed the mother, so the mother should love the baby. So, they come out there all, covered with gook. So she'd wash the baby up and give him to her, right? And the other one, Puah, would make poo-poo sounds to the baby to make the baby smile, so the mother should also see the baby smiling and be happy, right? So wait a minute. These women are risking their lives, right? Pharaoh says, kill the kids, right? They're risking their lives to give birth to these babies, and they're spending time washing their face and making silly sounds. Like, get out of there. Are you crazy? You give birth to the baby, give him to the mother, and run as fast as you can out of that house before Pharaoh shows up with his guys. They're going to kill you, right? And you saved the life. That's right. You did a great mitzvah. You saved the life of the mother. You saved the life of the baby. Now get out of there. And they said, no, it's not enough. This mother deserves a baby who she's going to love, who's pretty, who's clean, who's smiling. So we're going to do that. It's the exact same thing as God saying, I'm going to send Yosef to Egypt, but it's not enough to send him to Egypt in a stinky wagon. I'm going to send him in a fragrant one. I'm going to send him down. He's not going to go down to Egypt in a 57 Chevy. He's going in a Rolls Royce. And why? But because God says, and he's telling us the same thing, the details are important. How things are done is important. It's not just important to do what you have to do. You also have to do it in a way that's good. And we have this with people. When we deal with people, there are times you have to be difficult to people. Sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes you have to just do business. And it has nothing to do with nice or not nice. It's business. You're just doing business. And if you are nice about it, and you're kind, and you treat people with respect, it makes a world of difference. Now, I don't mean just in business. Everyone knows that makes, you're always going to buy from a store, even if it's a little more money, that treats you with respect, right, and doesn't treat you like a thief. And if you then go into a store that does, like, a friend of mine is a business consultant, and he always tells me the stories about this new approach that they have to business that he does. There's a fellow named Ron Mandel, a wonderful man. He's spending a number of months in China doing this right now, like he's working for a company there. So he says that he works with these companies that came up with an idea. Right? He gives me an example how this concept that he works on came around. And this company decided back, I guess in the 60s, they're going to create a clothing line under their own name. Right? Now everybody does it, right? Go to Harry Rosen's, go to the Bay, it's the Bay, but they don't really make it, right? It's not really theirs. So you say, how is it then that these people, they do what they do? They go out and they'll buy from a company and they'll sell it. But the guy says, so why should somebody buy from us? Like, why does anyone want, let's say, we're the Bay. Why would somebody want a shirt from the Bay? They want a shirt from Canelli, they want a shirt from Arrow, whatever company, John Henry, shirt company, you want a shirt, you buy from a known shirt company. The Bay is a department store, it's not a shirt manufacturer. So they said, we're going to make a rule. Anyone who buys any clothes from us with our label, we will take it back forever, anytime they want, no questions asked. So they can buy a shirt. They can wear it until their kid is too big to wear it. As long as the shirt comes back in one piece, we will give them their money back. Right? We will. So the people around the table are saying, like, you're nuts. People are going to go to garage sales. They're going to buy our shirts for 25 cents, right? Then they're going to come back to our store, and they're going to get a full refund. And they never paid more. They only paid 25 cents. They're going to get $10 or $15 or $50, depending on when it is. We're going to go out of business. So this is the guy says back to them. Because you believe that 2% of our customer base are prepared to steal from us, we should treat all of our customers like thieves. Now, every customer comes in here, we should presume that they're going to take advantage of us. So therefore, we're not going to make this rule. I say let's do business with 98% of the people who are trustworthy people, who will appreciate that we're doing this for them and will buy our clothing because of it. And if 2% of them go and they make a couple of bucks on us, it's worth it. For us to do the opposite and to treat everybody like they're a thief, nobody will come to us. And that's true. If you walk into a store and they start grilling you because you want to bring something back, and then they give you a hard time, right? You don't want to go there anymore, right? Right? It's like I go into a store. Like I had one time happen. I went to a store here, and they have a very liberal return policy. And I went in the morning, and we were going on a trip. So I went in the morning, and I went to where they sell books, and I bought a couple of paperbacks to read on the plane. Without realizing, my wife went later in the day, and she bought the same paperbacks for me to read on the plane, not knowing that I went. So it was the same day. I go back to the store, and I say, look, these are the paperbacks. We bought 2 copies of the same thing today, right? I'd like my money back. They said, no, we don't take books back. Mm-hmm. Well, why don't you take books back? Well, because people read them, and then they bring them back. Mm-hmm. And I said, but look, I just bought it today. I don't have time to read 2 books today. It was a couple hours ago. Well, that's our policy. So I said, this is ridiculous. And I said, I have no use for these books. I'm just leaving them, and I'm going to go. What can I do? You want to sell them again? You sell them again. You do what you want. What am I supposed to do with this? I said, I'm not going to come back. Now, they have a very liberal policy, but this time they had to enforce it. Why? Because they're saying to me, you're the kind of guy who would come into our store and read a book and then bring it back, right? And I'm not that kind of guy, and I resent being treated that way. That's the idea of what meant when God gave Yosef, right? He had to go down to Egypt. He had to go down as a slave, but he didn't have to go down in a wagon that stunk. He could go down in a nice way. The woman they went to help the Jewish woman give birth, even though they might get killed by doing this. It wasn't enough to just do that. They had to make sure that the mother enjoyed the experience. The mother loved the baby. So they went out of their way. That's the way we're supposed to be. That's how we're supposed to treat people. That's what happens there. I see we're not getting too far today. I didn't even get to him in Egypt. So let's take a couple of quick pieces that come up rather than going through them all. But if you look on chapter 28 and 208 and 209, the story suddenly changes. We have this whole story of Yosef being sold to Egypt, and in the middle, God puts a commercial. And the commercial is the story of Yehuda. Yehuda, it says, has 3 sons. And the first one finds this extraordinarily righteous and beautiful woman, and he marries her. But he decides that if he gets her pregnant, she's going to get ugly. She's going to get stretch marks, whatever. I don't know in those days what it was. So he didn't want her to have children, right? And so it says that what he did was that he had relations with her, but before she could get pregnant, he stopped. Right? He, in a way that she couldn't get pregnant. And it says because he did this, right, his name was Onan. You might have heard an Onanite. You might have heard the expression, so I don't have to be explicit in what it's talking about. So it says that he knew that the seed would not be his, right? So he acted in a way so she couldn't get pregnant, and he died. So his wife Tamar says, well, you have there's a law that you're supposed to, if you're married to someone and his brother and he dies and you have no children, the woman should marry the brother in order to have a child and name the child for the first husband. So he should carry on because he had no children. Right? So she goes and she wants to marry the brother. So Yehuda is the father. He says, okay, go ahead. That's the law. He marries the brother. Brother does the same thing. The brother is like, sees, you know what? This woman is so beautiful. I don't want to ruin her. So I'm not gonna get her pregnant. We'll have relations, but not in the right way. And he dies. It's his fault. He dies. But nobody knows, and God knows. So she comes, she wants another brother. This time Yehuda says, what are you, crazy? You killed 2 of my sons already. I'm not giving you a 3rd one. That's it. And the 3rd one's young anyways, so you'd have to wait. So she says, well, the one he's young, then the law is, right? You have to do it. You're the father. You're responsible. Right? So Yehuda's not interested. In the meantime, it says that Yehuda's walking down the road one day, and he has this uncontrollable urge. This is one place where it seems that God takes away his free will, and he has an urge to have relations with a woman. And there happens to be a prostitute there on the crossroads. So he has relations with her. Now this was no prostitute. This was her, Tamar, dressed up like a prostitute with the idea that God wanted her to have a child, knowing this prophetically. And God caused this interaction and caused him to be so filled with desire that he couldn't control himself. And he has relations with her, and she becomes pregnant, right? And he doesn't know. For all he knows, a prostitute. He has nothing to do with her anymore, but he doesn't have any money on him. You got to pay her. You know what I mean? You can't pay her. So he says, I'm going to give you my staff, which is a sign of, remember, Yehuda was the king, right? We know later on that all the kings come from Yehuda. He was the royalty among the Jews. So he had like a scepter. He gave her that, hold of that, and he gave her his ring, which was used to seal documents, right? Both symbols of being a king. You hold on to this, I'll get the money, I'll bring it back to you, you give me my stuff back, right? So it says that he went on, he sells his people, like, his entourage. Here's the money, go find that woman and get my stuff back. They go back, she's not there. Of course she's not there, because she's not a prostitute. It's Tamar, right? So of course she's not there. She takes off her disguise, she leaves, no one sees her again. And lo and behold, Tamar gets pregnant. Now Yehuda is a judge, right? He's the king. He sees Tamar is pregnant. And she's not supposed to be pregnant. She's supposed to be waiting for his youngest son to marry him, right? And she's bound to him by Jewish law. She's not allowed to marry someone else. And here she's pregnant. So they bring her up on a trial. And the law is she should be killed. She's like a married woman having relations with another man. And she says privately after he hears the case, she says to him, the man who did this, I did this with, this is his scepter and his ring. She tells him. Yehuda realizes it was me. This was no prostitute. This was Tamar, and that this is not simply lust. There is something going on here. Now he has a choice. Yehuda has a choice. He can say nothing, keep his dignity. I mean, imagine a guy like Yehuda, a person of this stature, even in these days where everybody is great, but he's the head. He has to admit that he had relations with a prostitute. Right? And if he doesn't, no one's going to know. He could just say nothing and she'll be killed. Right? That's it. It's over. But he doesn't, and he stands up and he says, it's mine. It was me. Right? He accepts responsibility for what he did, and he saves her life. Right? From her comes 2 children, of which one of them is the grandfather of King David, great-grandfather of King David, who is of course, the Messiah comes from him. So we see that this was not just fooling around. This was a serious thing. Because it was necessary that Tamar was supposed to have this child, right, from the line of Yehuda. If it wasn't from Yehuda's son, it would be from Yehuda. Ended up being from Yehuda, right? And that's what happens here. This is the whole story is amazing, because on the one hand, Tamar, she also could have she was prepared, and this is what the Talmud says. It is that for the righteous it is better to die than to embarrass somebody. And she could have embarrassed Yehuda. She could have taken out this. She knew who it was. She had to have relations with him. She knew who she was having relations with. She could have pulled out his ring and said, "Oh, this is the judge. Right? It's going to kill me because I had relations. I had relations with him. Not only was it permissible because he's the family that I have to have relations with, but he's the judge and he's going to say I did something wrong. He did it, but she doesn't do that. She could have saved her own life. She doesn't." Right? And why? Because she was understood. It is better even to die than to publicly embarrass somebody. Then from this we get a very strong understanding of what it means to embarrass somebody, how bad it is. And then she goes and then Yehuda, who understands also that he's going to embarrass himself, because it's better to embarrass yourself than to allow a wrong to be uncorrected, which would mean she'd be killed because he didn't want to tell the truth. So here he repents. So you see both of them acted heroically in the story. Now there's just one more thing I just want to mention, because we're not going to get to it. At the end of the story, well, not the end of the story, but you have Yosef goes to Egypt. And he gets accosted by the wife of the man who takes him in. And she wants to have relations with him. She has a prophetic vision that great people will come from a union between her and Yosef. She didn't realize it wasn't her and Yosef, it was her daughter and Yosef. And she tries to seduce him over and over. Finally, when he won't do it, and he's close to it, but he won't do it. She tells her husband that he tried to rape her and has him thrown in prison. Now, there's a lot to say on it, but we can't. But now, when he's in prison, you imagine the following thing. He's a Hebrew. He's a slave. He's probably not well regarded, right? Even though he was handsome, he was a good guy, whatever. To the Egyptians, he was a Hebrew and he was a slave. He was not high up on their list of people to look up to. And he was in jail for trying to rape the woman of the house that took him in and helped him, right? It's like, they used to say in the South with the black slaves, we take them in, we treat them with respect, and then look what they do, right? Of course, none of that was true. And here with Yosef is also not true. But you can understand that how he's looked at. Now, he's in jail with two members of the royal entourage, the chief wine steward and the chief baker, who are not just regular people. They are like royalty. They're not royalty, but they're like royalty. They're the highest echelons of the Egyptian government. And they're thrown into the same prison cell as this low-life Hebrew, basically drug dealer. You can imagine today you've got two politicians, let's say two U.S. senators get arrested and they have to go to jail. And they put them in jail with a low-level drug dealer, like an uneducated, not even a good drug dealer, like a street-level drug dealer. They put them in the same cell, right? And now they're interacting. One day, Yosef, they go to sleep, they wake up in the morning, and Yosef wakes up and he looks and he sees these two dignitaries. They look terrible. The day before, they don't look so great, they're in jail, but the next day they wake up, they look terrible. And he says to them, "Why do you look so bad? What's wrong?" So they tell him, "We had a dream," and this is what was in the dream, right? And we have the whole story of how they, who gets out, who doesn't get out, how Yosef gets out from this dream. But the whole fact that Yosef got out of prison, and in this way, and the whole idea that one of them was restored to his position, and one was killed, and Yosef becomes the second most powerful man in the world. Egypt is the most powerful country in the world. It's like he becomes like the vice president of the United States. From being a slave, right, he becomes the most powerful person. He's able to help his family. He's the catalyst to assist the Jews to come down to Egypt and begin the whole process that was necessary, right? That he became, right? And you know why it happened? What caused it to happen? 4 words. Why do you look so bad today? Right? I mean, it's not 4 words in English. In Hebrew, it's 4 words. Right? And who is he to talk to them? Right? Like this low-level drug dealer, so to speak, cares about the feelings of these 2 guys, right? And they listen to him. And the fact is that the fact that he took the time in prison with a life sentence, right, to ask them, how are you? To be nice to them. How are you? You don't look well. Can I help you? And that caused the entire destiny of the Jewish nation to happen. Those 4 words. This shows us that when I talk here in shul about the importance of greeting somebody when you come to shul, somebody new's there, to going out of your way to speak to them, to make someone feel welcome, especially someone who you might have heard of has had a hard time, or they're not used to coming to shul, or they don't know anybody here, and you go out of your way for them, you can change the world. Right? You can change them. You can make them happy. You can make them glad they came into shul. Because like I always say, nobody walks into shul without baggage. Everyone walks into shul, no matter how often you come here, right? And it's worse if you've never been here. And you walk in that door, you're carrying with you every negative experience you've ever had in a synagogue or in Jewish life is walking in with you. And the first person who sees you can make you feel that I'm never coming back in here again, or I made a mistake my whole life and I should have been coming here all along. All by how you're greeted by that first person. Right? Yosef greeted those guys with 4 words, and the entire future of the world changed. Right? And really, we're here today because Yosef said those 4 words. Not that God couldn't have done it another way, but God didn't do it another way. Right? God did it this way to tell us how important it is to speak to people, to greet people, to be caring and sensitive to people. That is enormously important.